Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Amy Ardrey.
Hi.
Amy, tell me a little bit about yourself and if you want, what you do professionally.
Well, I am a mom of two, and I am one-fourth of Unearthing Para-normalcy podcast.
1/4.
Yes, there are four of us that host it. And it's me.
That was a great title. Hang on a second. Let's not diss the intro there. That was perfect. Mother of two and 1/4 of a podcast. I really like that.
Yes, that is my life. I also run a family business, but, it just kind of pays for my podcast habit.
So what exactly are you the most fond of? Obviously, you love your kids, but I'm guessing the podcast is like the little hidden secret, like the ice cream in the fridge, I'd call it.
Yeah, it's the time that I get to be me and not just mom and not just the boss. It's just explore life and the paranormal and all the fun stuff.
So this is the secret side of you, the one that has the little goodies like Ghost Whisperer. Are you familiar with that show?
I have not watched that show in a long time, but yeah, I do remember that show.
Jennifer Love Hewitt. Well, when it comes to like your podcast, so what exactly do you try and focus on a little bit more?
Well, like the theme of our podcast is more of we dig in to find the normalcy in the topics. So everything paranormal everybody's scared of the paranormal, whether it be ghosts, aliens, things like that. And what you're scared of is you're scared of the unknown. And so what we like to do is we like to try to research it and bring as much information to the table to kind of take some of the fear out of it. We come from Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is, the center of the Bible Belt. And so everything paranormal or spiritual is considered evil as a whole, because, it's against the Bible or whatnot. So what we like to do is we like to just kind of take the information and share the actual facts about it to try to take some of the stigma off of it and try to bring fact into it so that people can make educated decisions on their own and lose a little bit of the fear of the stigma.
So how exactly are you doing this? You got to give me an example here, because I agree with you on the aspect of we're a lot of, at least for people, seeing is believing. But when it comes to the paranormal side of things, when it comes to ghosts, it's really, you have to see that. You have to, come encounter, you have to have something you can't explain. I have a few occurrences myself, but it's really trying to be open-minded. And if there's no proof or you can't physically have that, like, here it is, bam, right in front of you, then people are just gonna be like, all right, I don't really know if I believe your experience.
Well, the way we come at it, because I'm like what I like to call a skeptic believer. I want to believe all of it, but at the same time, like that, I need evidence, I need facts. And I also come at it at a point that no matter what an experience is, it was real to that person. So you can't disregard any of what their experience is, but you can take it and break it down, and you can look at, I think a lot especially with ghosts is probably the easiest one for me to help understand. And that's because I grew up in a very active haunted house as a kid. And one thing I've learned is most people exaggerate the story and add more fear to themselves. So say the light flickers, the ghost was, the lights were shaking and the lights were flickering. Well, no, the light just turned on and turned off, and that was it. But you've exaggerated it in your mind to make it more scary. And I try to put across that with spirits were people once too. So don't be afraid of them, but take ownership in your home and, be the boss of your home.
You got to tell me an experience here, because I already am sensing that you've had something pretty drastic. Like, if you want, I'll share one of mine first.
Well, like I said, I grew up in a very haunted house. Now, most of the stuff in that house happened to my mom and my dad, but we witnessed it. But one incident that happened in my adult life that actually terrified me was my husband he just gotten back from Iraq, and it was just him and I in the house, and I woke up in the middle of the night with the dogs barking, and I thought, I got to go let him out. And I opened my eyes and I saw my husband at the foot of the bed. So I thought, oh, good, he's going to do it. So I go to roll back over and go back to sleep, and he's laying in bed next to me. So immediately my mind went to somebody's broken into the house. And I turn and I look back, and this person sitting at the foot of the bed, I realized that I could see through them. And I just kind of sat there and watched them for a little while, and they just sat there, kind of had their head slouched down. And I moved at some point, and they sat up and then turned and looked at me. And all I could think to do at that moment in time was to just close my eyes. Like, if I can't see you, you can't see me. But then I spent the whole night laying there with my eyes closed because I was terrified to open my eyes back up to see him, like, at my face.
Yeah.
But that was probably the most terrifying thing. And to me, I think what made it more scary was the fact that I thought there was somebody who broke into my house. But at that house, I always had little things happen here and there, but that was the first time I ever saw that spirit.
Would you say that there's warning signs before a ghost approaches? I feel like for me, all my paranormal experiences happened when I was pretty little. And then as I got older, I would call them more psychic experiences. My mom's a big believer in like the psychic side of our family. Like when it comes to my mom's side, like my grandma being able to see ghosts, which I always chalk up to like some sixth sense stuff. Like, it's that, like that. But my grandma's like, that's not how it works. But like I've said, I've had a dream before, and then it was so real to me, which happens to me a lot. Like I'm an insomniac, so when I do get sleep, like a nap or something, but when I get a sleep, it's a deep sleep. Like I probably just slept 45 minutes, and I mean, it feels like I've slept like 20 hours. But when I get these dreams, I can see things that I didn't really like, they're very, very like real scenarios. And I remember I found a dead body that my like mom was all over Facebook. She was looking for, and she showed me this picture of this guy after I told her my dream. And I was like, that's him. And she was like, where did you see the body or whatever? And I explained it to her. And then a couple of days later, they found him in that same like kind of general looking area. So things like that have occurred. But when I come to like, when I was a kid, I don't know if even sometimes, we get spooked and ghost bumps pop up or something. I felt like sometimes I'd be sitting there and I would feel like eyes on me, like somebody was watching me, but no one was around. I mean, I could be in the middle of my room, door shut, and I'm like looking around. Like it felt like I don't know if a camera was on me, but it felt like someone had their eyes on me. But also like you get a weird cold in like the back of your neck, and you're just like you don't feel like something's right. I always chalked it up to like I remember like if I would mention that to my grandparents, they'd be like, "There's just someone watching over you. It's one of your angels watching over you." I'm like, "But what is that though?" Because I don't just randomly feel like somebody's about to murder me with a butter knife. I don't think my guardian angel's working that damn hard.
Well, I think what a lot of it is because you said it wasn't a child. Children, I feel like they don't have the filters that we get as an adult. So they're able to, because, everything is magic and imagination for them.
Santa.
So, yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things that they don't have those filters. So you see that stuff, you feel that stuff because you don't know that you're quote unquote not supposed to. With spirit, what I find most common is most of the time spirits just want attention. They're not out there to really hurt you or anything like that. I mean, you've got some crazy ones out there, but for the most part, they just want to be acknowledged. And what I notice with a lot of cases is activity does pick up. It starts out small, and then it picks up to a point where you might have full-blown apparition or something like that. And I think it's the little things are just trying to get the attention. And then when that doesn't work, they go big bang. I'm like, hey, I am here. And as a child, you see that a lot.
Do you think that is like a ghost or an apparition, whatever you want to call it? Where's your belief on this factor of it? Like, what is it to you? Do you think that it's someone that died and then it's them still having this interaction with the real life world based on like after their death, like they never went to heaven, they never went to hell, they're just stuck here? Do you think that like they, like if you told them like, do you remember how you died, they'd know, or they'd still be able to think after that memory kind of? Or do you think they are a memory? Because I had that point brought into my head. Is it an echo, like a little, like we make so much of an impact with our energy around each other every single day, at the fact that we're just vanished off this earth and we're gone forever and there's nothing left of us doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when I see people talk about ghosts or when I hear ghost experiences, they're confined to a certain area, and it makes me think that that's because that person is so impacted with their energy there that they just haven't been able to leave. So it's a memory more like you know, it's a bit of a stoner thought, but I mean, it's still like interesting to think about. Like, is it just a relapsed memory over and over again on replay?
I think it's actually a combination of a lot of things. I think that there are earthbound spirits, ones that are stuck here for some reason, that they have passed and they're just stuck here, and they either don't want to move on or they don't know how to move on. I also think there's something it's kind of like a lower elemental form, which would, um, there's an occultist, Madame Blavatsky. I don't know if you know anything about her, but she was very big in the late 1800s, and her big thing was, the spirits mediums are communicating with aren't actually your deceased loved ones, but they are low level elementals, or kind of we like to call them astral hobos on our podcast.
Astral hobos.
They just like to make mischief. They'll tell you what you want to hear, things like that, but they're not actual spirits of deceased loved ones. So I think we get combinations of the two. I think that there can be that residual energy, like you're talking about, where it's just the memory, and that gets stuck in a location or in an object or something like that, and it just kind of repeats itself over and over again. So I think it's a combination of a whole bunch of things.
Well,
I don't personally believe in like an evil entities and like demonic entities, but I do believe that some of those lower elementals can cause a lot of harm and mischief if allowed to do so.
Like, do you ever talk about revenge spirits, or the vengeful ghosts, the ones that they always talk about in articles? Like, I remember when I dived deep into this paranormal stuff, I had a buddy of mine that was super interested in it, and he was like, I'll podcast anything about paranormal stuff. So I'm like, all right, let me get some topics down for you. So we were like talking about the Banshee. We were talking about the Lady in White, the Lady in Red. I mean, the Lady in White's a pretty insane story. I don't know if you've ever heard of this ghost story called Screaming Jenny.
I have not heard that one, no.
So it's basically these train tracks. Apparently there was a girl that was very suicidal or something, and she tried to end up, I guess, like either covering herself in gasoline or something and trying to go onto some train tracks or something and trying to kill herself. Well, something went wrong. She accidentally got caught on fire too soon, and not like in the way, so it was more of like a panic, not really just like trying to do it. And she ended up running on fire down these train tracks, and this train hit her. So all these conductors, all these people that ride this monorail or ride whatever these train tracks, at exactly at the same time every single night, like 11:01 p.m. or something, would hear this scream of this girl as they drove by, and people would think, oh, it's the sound of the train, oh, it's the screeching of the tracks. But then they would talk about seeing a bright light, like a flashing light kind of coming at them and screaming, and then once they'd run through it, it was gone. And I was like, so is that the memory of that girl? And that was, you hear cases of that. And the weird thing is, when you're reading it, you're like, wow, this is nuts. But at the same time, it's like, there are people that when you hear them on television, some of them do sound far-fetched. Don't get me wrong. If you listen to the X-Files, don't take any of your knowledge to the bank on that one. But when you hear somebody who's like really empathetic in their voice and either has convinced themselves to believe this or has experienced something, you can't dismiss it.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of those cases, you are dealing with like an earthbound spirit that is stuck here and they're just acting out. But there's also something that we've covered in our podcast that is a thought form entity. And a thought form entity a tulpa, where it gets created on its own, you make it yourself.
Yeah.
Or more of an egregore, where it's kind of accidentally created by society. And these are actual entities that have been created, but they've been created through stories and being told over and over again, to where the energy has been put into it. And then this entity arrives and is actually acting out the storyline that's been told over and over again. So I think in a lot of those cases, like you know, because every town, every city has their woman in white or their crybaby bridge or, you know, something like that. And I think what a lot of those are just the legends being told over and over again until that energy is put into the area, creating these egregores that mimic the story. That's all they're there for. They're just there to replay these events, but it's enough energy put into it that they can exist.
What do you think, when it comes to, out of all the topics you talk about in your paranormal podcast, the most interesting to you? Maybe not one that was more popular with viewers or your friends, but one that you super hooked into, a certain story, a certain thing that you read across, were like, this is crazy. I mean, how is nobody understanding this?
Oh man, we've done so many. I would say that my sucked into was probably Mothman. I really get sucked into our cryptid episodes.
God, the
And
Mothman comes again. That's the one cryptid I am so sick of. Just like everyone, because I always hear it so much, and then my buddy tattooed him onto his arm, and it's like my buddy's favorite one. I'm like, why does no one talk about the hero, Bigfoot? That is my boy.
our Bigfoot episode is quite hilarious. We did a Bigfoot episode with a California podcast that, and it's a pretty good one. It's a
Did you
two-parter.
do
I
one on the
recommend
Yeti?
listening. We haven't done the Yeti yet, no.
Please, for the love of
But
God, have me on for the Yeti. I have studied this guy so much. I actually had in my mind, like, imagine the Yeti versus Bigfoot. I'm talking about like a Mike Tyson match of Yeti and Bigfoot. But I mean, it's just so like that is believable to me. But when it comes to the paranormal, kind of shifting back this way, is the fact is, it's really hard to, like, try and make it sound so so sincere on a podcast about it, but there is something, I believe, what we would call an afterlife. I just think that movies, all these types of ghost stories that we hear about, they really glamour it up or make it way too propaganda-y, much like they do with a Bigfoot in a movie or something. They make him like either so savage that he's evil, or they make him so nice and has like godlike powers. I'm like, could it just be that they're just a tiny bit different from us? Like, you got to think, if a radio has frequencies, so there's a channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, maybe everybody's tuned into channel 1 and then these ghosts are on channel 2. We always talk about a spiritual plane or another plane of existence. Is that possible?
definitely. I mediums that I've talked to, they talk about it's like tuning a radio station to get to in the spirit world. And once you're on that frequency, you can hear things and see things that you normally wouldn't. And a lot of people can do that on their own, and they just accidentally do it, where they kind of zoom into that. And one thing with like Bigfoot, that's one of the theories behind Bigfoot, is that Bigfoot is actually more of a elemental entity that only some people can see and others can't. I like to believe Bigfoot is more of a creature we just haven't figured out yet.
That's what I
But
like. I like to think of him as like the protector of the woods. Like, he
yeah,
helps out the little earthling creatures, and whenever he sees a picture of Smokey the Bear, he pisses on it.
but when it comes to the afterlife, I think the afterlife is what you make it, and I think that that's a lot of the spiritual problem, like the spirit communication and things like that. I think that all of that is around all the time, and everybody can tune into it. You just have to learn how to tune into it.
More
And
people are probably open to it than others. I sense there's a thing, like when it comes like in the psychic thing, is like empathy. It's having
mhm,
this, or being an empath, I would call it. It's a sense of being in touch with obviously the things around you as well, which I think is extremely important. It seems like people lose connection to anybody and everything, like right, like we're experiencing with this pandemic situation with the social distancing. There was social distancing before there was social distancing. Like, we just are now told we're not allowed to talk to our neighbors. So now it's like, I want to go talk to my neighbor. Like, before we didn't give a shit. We just would go home and watch Netflix or watch whatever we wanted to watch. And I believe that isolates so many of these key features into our personalities, into our life, which is that detail, that like that feeling, that sensation you get when, like, you can tell when you're talking to someone if they're in pain. a lot of people can't do that. And I think that's important, that we need to restore that, because that sense of human connection, not only in with everybody else, but also connection within ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I think's been happening for years and years. As the internet's become more popular, things like that, we can social distance and still stay connected. But like I noticed with my kids, especially my daughter who's 9, she's starting to get into video games and things like that. And she will talk to her friends on Facebook, because she's got, Facebook Kid Messenger, things like that. She'll talk to her friends on there. But I remember when I was a kid, we were outside all the time and we were always together with each other. And I was actually listening to one of your podcasts, and you were talking about I think his name was Philip. He was another paranormal podcaster, about how your podcast is all about opening up the communication.
Yeah.
And I really, really liked that concept. And when we do interviews with people, that's how we do it. Our interviews with, we've done interviews with some paranormal investigators, other podcasts, things like that. And we come at it unscripted when it comes to interviews, because we like to leave it open.
That's very important, and I appreciate that you do that. I think for me, I always get a little bit scared or a little bit kind of freaked out when people call me an interviewer. Even though it does seem like that through the podcast, I do try and make it as much as a conversation, just because I don't have any script. I get people all the time asking, what do you want from me? And pretty sure same thing when I DM'd you. You probably thought I was going to attack you, or I was going to say something poke or prod or do whatever everybody always does. And I'm like, I'm legit here to just have a conversation. Like, I don't have any script. The name of the podcast says it all. Like, I appreciate what everybody's doing right now, especially like you guys with your podcast. I came across it. I'm like, people talking paranormal. Let's get some people like this out on the podcast. If it's good for you, it's good. You want to use it as a stepping stone or whatever to get your name even farther out there, go ahead. I'm just like, I just want to have a chat and see what's up. Because like, I mean, we're all out here searching for information. I just choose not to get mine on fucking Google.
Exactly. And I like the fact that when you communicate with people who are like-minded in situations, or open-minded, they don't even have to be like-minded. They're just open-minded. You can learn a lot back and forth. That as long as you're willing to listen and talk, then we can all learn a whole lot more and grow more.
I think a lot that happens to do with a lot of reason why people don't believe in the paranormal, and a lot of people don't believe in these type of psychic rituals and stuff too, where at faults, I do have my moments where I'm like, nah. And that's only because of the fact of what movies have done, and the fact of what we see when we see, I would call a bullshit artist, which is on the side of the street doing hand readings or something, and they really just want the buck, or they want this. Because I've talked to those people. I'm not a fan. I can sense it right off the beginning. I'm just like, hey man, I don't think you're being genuine at all with this. I can sense that, like, they're not even trying. They just know they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And I think that does people a lot of wrong. Because I mean, how many people out there really want to talk to someone who has passed away, that is gone, that you want to have your last few moments with? I mean, I have family members that are gone where I'd like to sit down and be like, what? Like, I have so many deep and questions and stuff that could even bring me to tears. And I'm pretty sure we've all had like those weird dreams where it feels like we had a dream about a lost family member, and it was so real, like it actually happened. I mean, I've woken up in tears from something like that before, and I always wondered, is that a paranormal encounter, or is that just my brain trying to lull me to this place of acceptance?
I 100% believe that when we dream about deceased loved ones, it's them coming to visit us. And the easiest way for them to speak to us is in our sleep, because our brain is shut down. We're not trying to rationalize things. So it's easier for them to communicate with us then. I know for me, when my dad passed away almost 10 years ago now, and it was a really tough time for me, because my dad passed away, and then the very next day after his funeral, I found out I was pregnant. So it was like all these different emotions were going through me, and I kept having dreams about my dad, and they were really demented dreams, honestly. But then when I sat and started thinking about it, it was because I had a whole lot of guilt about my dad's death. And in these dreams, he was showing me what would have happened, because I was the one who said, okay, he wouldn't want to live as a vegetable, let's just pull the plug. And I felt very guilty about that. And in these dreams, he was showing me what his life would have been like had he survived. But it took me a while to realize that that's what he was doing. And then once I realized that's what he was doing, I started having dreams about him and I just sitting there fishing, or, you know, things that we used to do together, just sitting there talking. And I started having really great dreams about him that were nice closure dreams for me. And I think that that's a way that they communicate with us that really just kind of helps us move on, because we're still here and we're going to be here until it's our time to move on. And if we dwell on the past and the loss, it's harder for us to move forward. And so they like to help us move on and move forward in life.
How do you typically come about, like when you're reading an article or something that's super strong to you? Do you have how do you pick them out? Do you just randomly come across them, or do you have like a hat that you pull something out of? Like, whose line is it anyway?
Well, we keep a running list of episode ideas, things to talk about, things like that. But then if, you know, one of us is, you know, scrolling, you know, Yahoo or Google or whatnot, and we find some really interesting story, then we come together as a group and say, hey, let's look more into this. Or we're really big on, with our listeners on our Facebook group that we have, asking them for ideas, trying to cater towards them. Or one thing that we call it our haunted road trip. And we'll go to our podcast stats, and whatever city and state or country that we have the most listens in at that moment in time, we'll research that area and find some of the most haunted, usually public sites, so that our listeners that are in that area can even go and visit these sites. Or if they visited them before, they send us pictures and things like that. And it's really cool to be able to interact with our listeners that way.
I think that's important too, is not only the genuine or like real experiences that you can kind of bring to the table when it comes to podcasting, but obviously making the listener feel like a part of it too. You know, it's so hard. We listen to and we watch so many things throughout life that's just fantasies that are all like, oh, what ifs, or if you had $1 million, you could be building a house like Mark Cuban or something. It's like, yeah, but I don't have that. And honestly, I don't want to watch this because it just makes me feel sad. I want something that I can have faith in, where I know the person's on the same level as me. You know what I mean? I think that's pretty important. And when it comes to something like paranormal and all these places that you can investigate, is there anywhere on your bucket list that you really want to go and see for yourself? Because I'm thinking Alcatraz. I mean, come on.
Alcatraz would be really cool. One of the places on my bucket list is the Valeska Axe Murder House. Have you heard of that one? Where it was a whole family that was murdered in the middle of the night with an axe. And that house is supposed to be extremely haunted. I believe it's in Iowa.
The
It's on my
Amityville
list.
house?
No, not the Amityville house.
Did you see that movie though?
I've seen that movie 100 times. Yeah.
With Ryan Reynolds?
I've seen the Ryan Reynolds one. I prefer the original one though.
Look, I'm straight, but let me tell you something. Ryan Reynolds. All right.
Yeah, he's nice to look at.
So what is it? What's exactly this murder house that you're talking about? So a guy murdered his whole family with an axe?
Well, no, it wasn't. The father was actually murdered as well. It was a husband, a wife. I believe it was their 2 daughters, and then 2 neighborhood girls that were staying the night. And somebody broke into the house while they were sleeping and just murdered them all with an axe. And they'd never caught the person who did it. I can actually look it up real fast and tell you when it was. I can't remember dates. But the house is supposedly extremely haunted.
This is why we don't let strangers into our house. I see why there was an important thing when I was a kid. Don't let anybody in the house rob you unless they know you. But that's a good reason why we have the hole in the door, to be able to tell who it is. When I was a kid, I opened up the door at 1 o'clock in the morning one time because I woke up from a deep sleep and I thought it was like 9 p.m. or something. So I was like, who's knocking at my chamber door? And then I came over and I go to open it up and it's just some guy, like, your parents home? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, and walks away. I'm like, well, either my parents are drug dealers or they're wanted for some crime.
Well, actually, my day job that pays for my podcast habit is I work for a locksmith company. And so we deal with a lot of security and things like that. And one of the cool things is we do cameras, and sometimes people will send camera footage of like paranormal things happening at their house, and that's kind of fun to watch.
What exactly are we talking about paranormal though? Like just something falls off the table that couldn't be explained?
That, or we had one that, like actually one that was at my house particularly. My daughter, she's really big into the paranormal as well, and she wanted to set up cameras to watch the house one night. So we turned our security cameras inward so they could see into the house, and she caught the light in the hallway flickering on and off in the middle of the night while she was asleep on the couch, and stuff like that. Just weird happenings.
I had a weird occurrence when I was a kid. Me and my mom were laying, like my mom was laying on the couch beside my couch. So we had two couches in our family room. We're not laying together. We're not weird like that. But I was laying down watching TV. I think I was probably like 12 or 13 years old. And I had one of the Slurpees you get from 7-Eleven sitting on the counter, like in the middle of the table. So there's no way it was going to fall over. It was on a coaster and everything. I was that good of a kid. And I remember it was like late at night, and I just shut my eyes and went to sleep, and all I saw was this flicker of water hit me in the face. And I look over, my mom's completely like turned over, passed out on the couch, like she was out like an hour before I was, and this Slurpee had fallen off the table and landed straight up, so it wasn't spilled anywhere, it just went straight up. So I got flickered with water, and so did my mom. So she like wipes the back of her neck, turns around like, what the hell was that? And then we look, and like there's just a Slurpee on the ground. And then we look over and we see this candle that my mom had lit that's going out of control. Like, I mean, like it's like about to blow over and get these, like, she likes to put a lot of fancy shit up on the walls. I don't like it, but like to make it look nice, like drapes and all this stuff. Well, it's about to light one of those curtains on fire. So she blows it out, and we sit there and she goes, that was so weird. And then we all just went back to bed. But she still holds that memory, like, you remember that? Like, I think that was someone from the after. So I'm like, I don't know about that, but I mean, it was something I couldn't explain, where I wish I had some cameras in my house to be able to tell me what's going on.
Yeah, there's and for us, there's never a camera on when we need it.
Yeah.
I've got a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old, and in our house, a lot of the things that happen is just toys moving. One day there was a rubber bouncy ball sitting on the floor, and it just kind of started rolling in big circles around and around. And my husband said, "Do you see that?" And I turned and I looked, and we just sat there and watched it for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it stopped. And usually when things like that happen, I just acknowledge it. I'm like, "Hi, whoever's playing with the ball," and we move on. At first, it used to creep me out because it happened, because it's not supposed to be happening. But now I've gotten to the point that we have enough stuff that happens in our home that it's like, okay, hi, how are you doing?
Like,
and
I had
move
a
on.
long ass day. I got a hot pocket in the oven. Let's not do this.
Yeah, there was one day I was folding clothes, and the light here right above me right now in the dining room turned on, and I was in there folding clothes, and I had actually just had a conversation with a friend about a nephew who had killed himself, and I thought, that's really interesting that this happened just at that time. And so I said, I was like, "Hey, Richie, if you want to come help me fold clothes, come help." And then as soon as I said that, the light turned back off. I was like, I guess that's no. But I'm looking for that ghost maid. That's like my ultimate paranormal goal, is to have a ghost maid, somebody who comes and cleans the house for me while I'm at work.
I feel like they do more harm than good, to be honest with you, because every time I sit down, a light flickers back on. I got to get up and turn it off and then sit back down. Like, are you trying to get me to exercise? Because you're the worst ghost nutrition coach I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, it would be great. Just have to pay them. They just show up. They do their thing. Yeah, whatever.
The ghost maid thing's no joke, though. All right, so when I was a kid, there's this place in Berlin, in my town. You can look it up. It's called the Atlantic Hotel. I think it was built in like 1890 something. It's supposed to be this old style hotel. When I was a kid, my mom used to work the waitress down by the restaurant. So there were times where, like, it was during winter, we weren't busy or anything. So it would just be her, my aunt, and then like one chef in the back. So also with hosting, she would also help people with like the like kind of the hotel side of things as well. So I remember I was sick from school one day, and I was just like, maybe a little bit of tummy ache. And then she took me to work with her. So I went up into one of these old style rooms and laid down on the bed. And I'll never forget, it was Scooby-Doo on the TV, and it was where they go to Vampire Rock. And there was that band that played that song, Earth, Wind, and Fire. And I'll never forget that till the day I die. And I remember watching this, and the basic rules you give a kid: don't talk to anybody, don't ask for anything, those type of stuff. So I'm just sitting there lying on the bed watching TV, and this woman comes by, like an old style hotel maid outfit. So I'm like, makes sense. We're in this type of hotel. Obviously, they're still rolling with the 80s, and then or 1800s, I should say. And then she rolls up and she goes, "How you doing, sweetie?" It was an African American woman. I was just like, I'm okay. My mom said I wasn't supposed to talk to anybody. And I swear to you, she goes, "Oh, it's fine." She goes, "Do you need me to get you anything?" Like in a sweet voice. And I was like, "No, I'm fine. Thank you. I'll ask my mom if I need something." And then she goes, "All right, well, I'll be right down the hall if you need me." And then she immediately, goes by. So I see her pass, like go through, like, I guess if you're looking at the doorway, walk by the doorway. So she starts, I guess, going down the hall. I immediately give it a second. I mean, not even more than a second, and hop right off my bed. And then I literally run, pick up at her feet, run right to the door. I look out the door and look to the right, look to the left. Nobody's out there. I said, there's no way with that cart that she had that she was able to right down the hallway that fast, especially in a second. So I ran downstairs. The room I was at was right at the top of the steps. So I could literally just pop it right around the corner and run right all the way down the steps to where my mom was. And I'm run down, I'm seeing them, and I'm like, like kind of out of breath, like a kid is when they try and tell you a story. Like, and there's but I told her, I was like, "Hey, I just ran into this woman upstairs. She asked me if I was hungry. I said, no, but I am kind of hungry." And my mom looked at me like, "What?" And my mom has kind of had some experiences there herself, so she wasn't too new to this whole thing. And looked over at my aunt, and she goes, "What exactly did you see?" And I started explaining to it, and their mouth just dropped, and they looked at me and like, "There's nobody else in this hotel." And I thought they were messing with me, but I was a little kid, so I didn't dive deeper into it. But I remember she would always bring that up now when I see her. It's just like, "Hey, remember that time? These experiences you have when you're little?" I'm like, "I don't fucking remember. Tell me, was I coming across ghosts, or was I coming across my imaginary friends that I thought were my imaginary friends? And really, they're just people trying to communicate with me."
Well, hotels are probably some of the most haunted locations.
I worked at one
And
for 3 years, and I came across 4 deaths, so I know.
yeah, there's so much energy. So many people come and go, and yeah. When you talk about imaginary friends, I had an imaginary friend growing up, and this was in that extremely haunted house that I lived in. And later on in life, I was talking to my mom about it because we were talking about the spirit in that house, and she was describing to me that spirit, and I said, "Wait a second." And then I described it because I had an actual visualization of this imaginary friend. And I mean, I can still close my eyes and see him. And I described him to my mom, and she said, "That sounds just like the spirit that I saw in that house." And then it was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's why I saw him all the time, and I would talk to him, and we would play together. And he was mischievous. He would tell me to do things just to make my mom or dad mad, you know, little things. And then they get on to me, and I said, "But Applejack told me to do it." And what's interesting, my daughter didn't really have an imaginary friend, but my 3-year-old son has this imaginary friend, and his name is Jack. And just so happened that his name was Applejack. And so I'm starting to kind of wonder if it could very well be the same spirit that is connected to my family somehow, because the spirit moved with us all the time.
Do you think that if you could ask, I mean, like, if there is a possibility that you could, or that we could speak to them, like, clearly get a message to, what would like to ask one of these ghosts? If you could ask anything in the world, what would you want to ask? I'd want to know, what are the Powerball numbers going to be, or what, if I'm at a casino, what's that guy's card hand or something that's going to get me a lot of money?
I don't know, what would I ask? I don't know, maybe the secret of like energy transfer, like the communication. Like, I want to know that stuff. I'd want to know, how are they talking to me? How,
I
what
think
could we
it's
do?
I think it's a lot like, you ever seen the show Supernatural?
Uh-huh.
when the people pass up on going with their reaper and their ghosts are stuck here or something, and it's like they slowly start to deteriorate. I look at
Mhm.
it like that. Like when you're freshly dead, you're this brand new ghost, and after like a couple hundred years or something, like pieces of you start falling off. Like there was always one thing: I'll never want to be cremated. Because I read like through Egyptian myth and folklore that like your body's your ticket to your afterlife. So then I had this thought like, if my body's my ticket into the afterlife, like a vessel, if they cremate you, am I going to be a pile of ash in the afterlife? Like you're dead. You're like, well, I'm finally here. And then you just spontaneously catch on fire. Like, oh, it hurts. It hurts. And that's just because they're burning you on earth. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I'd rather deteriorate.
I actually literally told my husband that do not cremate me. I do not want to be cremated at all. And he's like, why? And I said, I don't know. There's just something about it that I don't want to be burned. Like,
I've talked to a few morticians. I'm like, how do you know you're getting all of that person in that jar? Like, no, we thoroughly clean it. I'm like, yeah, but come on now. I mean, I can thoroughly vacuum my carpet, and I guarantee you I probably missed a spot or missed some type of microfracture of a crumb or something. I'm like, you're telling me those urns that are sitting on my fireplace are all my grandparents? I'm not talking to some dude's uncle in freaking Taiwan or something. Like that's you can't lie to me on this.
yeah, it's just not something that I've ever even wanted done. And if you want to be cremated, you want to be cremated. That's fine. It doesn't matter. It's up to the individual. But yeah, that's always been one of my big fears. And also a big fear is that what if you can still feel after you're dead?
That's what I'm saying. If you're on fire in the afterlife, you're fucked. Oh my God. I wish people would understand what I meant by that. Thank you for that. Oh my goodness. Like imagine if you can feel like yeah, I couldn't do it. I feel like, what would you say would be the worst way to die? Because people always talk about like, or what would be the worst and what would be the best? I feel like people always talk about the best being dying in your sleep, but I don't want to die in my sleep. I want it to be quick. But I know if it's going to be quick, like if a bullet hits me in the head or something, then if there is a spiritual or ghost side of me, I'm going to be flying above my body. Like, I want to fucking kill that person that did that. So I'll have a revenge thing inside of me. So I'm like, then I would be an unfinished ghost. I don't want that.
Yeah, I think the worst way to die would be fire. Like number one, I would, yeah, be the worst way to go.
From what I've
But
heard of people that have been in giant fires and have been like almost burned alive, like had to get their skin transplanted back onto them, apparently it's pretty soothing.
oh yeah,
Apparently it's like, apparently if you experience so much pain or something, it can like mix up your receptors or something to where it feels
that would make
really, really
sense.
good. So they're like, it actually is like, it's the same thing. Did you know a seizure feels good?
I did not know that.
I had a few friends that have had seizures. Like, dude, it's the best thing in the world. I'm like, best thing in the world. Like, it's like pure ecstasy. It's like your body's shutting down, but you hit this like euphoric state. It's the same thing. Like right when you're about to die, after all that pain, your body sends that relief thing into you. It's the same thing with that. I'm like, I feel like
Hmm.
the worst then would be drowning because that one is a pain.
Yeah, I think because the fear during drowning would be pretty traumatic, just in the fact that you're naturally going to hold your breath as long as you can. So it's going to actually end up being very painful. So yeah, that would not be fun.
I like talking about death scenarios. It's like watching 1,000 Ways to Die, which came on right after the X-Files. I remember
Yeah.
that one.
See, this is the type of stuff we talk about all the time in our podcast. Like, we literally just sit down and have a conversation about the paranormal with some research involved. But
I think if we were going to talk about like maybe a best death, I think the best death I just thought of would be like a sacrifice. Like if someone
yeah,
pulls a gun up in a store and then you just roll up like a G, like I'll take that bullet. And then he's like, okay, and then shoots you. You're like, I was not expecting that one.
actually, one of the most epic deaths that we've actually talked about on our podcast, I said I want to die by dragon. I want to be eaten by a dragon. And they looked at me and I was just kind of like you're looking at me right now. And I said, but think about it. How many people can say they were eaten by a dragon?
That's okay. I'm about to say that reminds me. You ever seen the movie Hot Tub Time Machine?
Yes.
Where he's like, what's the best death? He's like, shotgun to the dick. I'm like, dude, that wouldn't even kill you. That would just be painful. But I'm like, it's those weird ones that you hear about. Like, if you look up like weird deaths in history, there's some crazy ones out there. Like I remember, there's a show that was like, it takes place in like an emergency room. It shows like the worst emergency room scenarios or something.
Yeah.
A dude was mowing his lawn and got a tree branch from a twister or something. That he was mowing his lawn in a freaking twister. The freaking branch flew right through the side of his neck and went clear through to the other side. So he's sitting on the hospital bed like, this is my life. And he just has a giant tree branch in there. I'm like, this is like insane. There's people that probably die from something like this. Imagine going out like that.
Oh yeah. Well, I live in Oklahoma. We do experience that type of stuff like every year. And yeah, there's some pretty crazy ways to die. There's some really cool shows about the ways people have died. But
I want to go out by 52 quarters.
52 quarters?
He swallowed 52 quarters.
There you go.
Why
go out rich, right?
I don't know. What you know the kid, he's got a podcast. It's pretty crazy. It's like you think he wasn't a step above swallowing 52 quarters over like a dare? I'll try and swallow the real life objects of the Lucky Charms just to be able to prove a point. Well, even though you're doing all the podcasting with you're 1/4 of the group. So who exactly do you feel like understands you the most in the group? Like the one that you kind of like, obviously, like if you do a group podcast, if I have my buddies over and we're all sitting in a room together, I know the person that's going to agree with me the most. And I know the person that's going to give me the most crap if I bring up something crazy.
Well, I do the podcast with my husband, Dave, my baby brother, Chad, and then our adopted brother, Eli. And so I would say who gives me the most crap would probably be Chad, the little brother. But they all understand me in different ways, and I think that's what works really well with our dynamic is that we are very respectful of everybody's opinions and ideas, but we'll give each other shit when we screw up or we, say something weird, but we always have fun with it, and that's the important thing to us is just to have fun with it and learn.
Yeah, that sense of comfortability is definitely needed in a topic like this. If you have a couple of people that are just sitting there giving you crap the whole time, you wouldn't be able to, fully get in touch with this, like, first of all, in tune side of yourself, or you really want to become open. I mean, how many times are we always worried about what someone else is thinking of us? Especially if you talk about something like this, you're immediately like, I was thinking like, oh, what are people going to think by the way I'm saying this? It's just like, you have to just do it. You have to be open-minded to things. I mean, that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my entire life was become open-minded. But as you start to see the world through so many people's eyes, at least through their experiences or through their thoughts, you start to realize that there's a reason why everybody thinks the way that they think. And I think that is very important that we need to keep in touch. I mean, especially in times like this, we got people that are just so closed off to new information or closed off to, they always want to think it's just this way or no way. It's like we live in a completely different world now where we need to focus on maybe you can understand that person's point of view. You don't have to agree with it, but understand where they got from and how they got there.
Exactly. And like I said earlier, everybody's experience is real to them. And if you remember that and you remember that everybody perceives life and perceives things differently and you're willing to just listen to them, you'll learn. Whether you agree with them or not, you'll learn something new with everybody that you come in contact with, as long as you stay like that.
Now, what's one goal you have either for yourself or for the podcast? Where do you want to see it in a couple of years?
I would like to see our podcast. Oh, I'd like to see us grow in just the number of people we can reach. We're actually going to record our 100th episode this coming weekend. And we were just talking about, from where we started, how excited we got when we got the first listener that we knew wasn't us, and now we average, 150 to 200 listeners per individual listeners per episode. And I said, just remembering when we got 10 listeners was so exciting to me. and now it's like, okay, we're not a huge podcast. We're not making bank doing the podcast, but we're reaching out and reaching these people and giving the information and just having conversations with people. And I think to just keep that going, just to reach more people and to, join in conversations with people.
I think that's especially important. It seems like a lot with what this podcasting thing is, it's meant to be a passion, it's meant to be a hobby, but you come across so many people that want to just beg for money, constantly want donations, constantly want to make this into a job. But I'm like, if you try and force it into a job, it's never going to become one. The likely possibility that it'll be something you live off of is very, very small. I mean, not saying don't go after it, but, it's people that are out here just wanting to hear other people that just want to, it's like talk radio, nobody ever had to really pay for talk radio besides, just maybe tax money if that went there. But my parents worked in radio and they always talked about the fact is like people want to hear a voice out there. They don't just want to hear music 24/7. After a while, you want to have that sense of communication. It's the same reason if you were the last person on earth, you do what Will Smith did in I Am Legend, where he starts talking to mannequins and stuff. You need to find that interaction. And I think that's especially important, whether it's interaction in real life or interaction with the paranormal. You need to have that there. And I think, it definitely, if you just keep it up, I mean, the whole factor is it's going to go wherever you want it to go. I think it's great that you have found a group of people that you can do it with, because I see so many group podcasts that are like, you start out doing it as like a fun thing, like a one-off or something, then eventually you get that listener and you're like, holy crap, somebody is listening to us talk about this. And then next thing you know, it's like everybody's like, we got this date to record, we got this to go. And it's like having a business. And I freaking love that, because I love seeing people just be like, I got to do this on this day. I'm like, oh my God, go.
That we record every Saturday, and it's one of those things that they, my husband lives with me, so I don't have to worry about him showing up. But my brothers will come over, we'll eat dinner, we'll talk, we'll hang out, and then we put the kids to bed, and then we record. And it's just kind of, we don't even think about it. It just kind of has become life now. But we've all said that, it didn't matter if we had listeners or not. We would continue to do it. And that, I think, is important too, because we still find enjoyment in it. Even after 100 episodes and thousands of hours of research, we still enjoy it. And that is big to me, is that I didn't want anybody to feel like they were at work. I want it to be, we are here to have fun, hang out, and invite other people in to listen to our conversations, because these were the same conversations we were really having during like game nights.
You just decided to hit
now
record.
We just do it with recording. Yeah. So, and we do a little bit more research than we do with game nights. Game nights we relied on Google to find out the answers to the questions. Now we come with the answers. But
game nights, what's a 4-letter word? Well, I really appreciate you, Amy, for coming out and doing the podcast. Why don't you go ahead and plug your show, where people can find it at? Obviously, it's probably on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, and all that. But, plug the name, the Instagram, everything you want to promote.
Yeah, we're Unearthing Para-normalcy. You can find us on all the major podcast apps and even some of the smaller ones. We also have a website. It's unpnormalcy.com. We listen to all the episodes there. We have a Facebook, Instagram, and a Twitter. The Twitter we're not as active on, because I feel like we're a little too old for Twitter. We don't understand the concept of Twitter quite right. But we're at UNP Normalcy or Unearthing Para-normalcy for all of those as well.
You don't have to worry about being on Twitter, because Twitter is a dumpster fire.
That is what I have heard. I have a Twitter account to follow our Twitter account, but I just don't deal with Twitter.
I just tweet at famous people like Morgan Freeman. I was like, I just found out you're God, so here's my Christmas list. And then like next thing you know, like he didn't answer back, sadly. But
I follow my favorite podcast hosts. That's one of my big things. Is my favorite podcast hosts, I'll follow them. So
it's a good way of keeping up with the world, I guess, but just don't tweet a bunch in one day or people are going to think you're crazy. That's right, Donald Trump. We're looking at you. Thanks so much for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.